and that is people want to feel like they're hanging out with us, right? Like they may want to get some information from this, but more than anything, it's like, hey, it's fun hanging out with Ross and Tim today, and that's, I want to look in on this conversation, and I want to listen to it, and I want to hear what they have to say next, but also just like, it seems like a good time or an interesting conversation or whatever, and that's a big part of it.
And we're live. We're probably the most chaotic start ever, but we have live streaming expert, and you have written a few books, as I can see in the background, about video live streaming. Ross Brand. So, as the more diligent watchers of this show, especially people who watch it live, will understand, I haven't done one for a while because I've been away in Thailand. But we are back. Let's start with a question, because this is a general purpose show. So some people will be like, what on earth is live streaming? So, as your LinkedIn profile says, live streaming strategist.
Yes.
What is live streaming? Just to the lay person, I mean, obviously we know what it is, and we're kind of doing it at the moment. But what is live streaming, and how did you end up as a live streaming strategist?
So I guess live video, of course, can be any type of video. It could be what you watch on TV when you watch a live news program or a live sporting event. When people talk about live streaming, they're often talking about streaming to the internet. Yeah. And there's kind of two ways people think of it, right? One way of streaming is, you tune into Netflix or something and you're streaming a show. It's just the way digital video is delivered over internet. But when we talk about live streaming, we're basically talking about going live from your phone, your computer, or some other type of software or hardware device, and transmitting your audio and video to the public, generally on social media platforms, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or X or wherever. There's a lot of different options for doing that, but basically it's going live, taking live video and audio and sharing it with a community on one of the social media platforms. It can be a one-to-many thing, but it's often characterized by the fact that there's a live chat going on. A lot of people are doing talking head, talk show type content, and of course video podcasting now is becoming a big thing, and some video podcasters do their shows live, and many do it in a live style so that they don't have to do a lot of editing. So basically, Tim and I are having this conversation live. It's in real time right now. We're having it as you're watching it, maybe a fraction of a second. You're watching it later than we're having it, but essentially this is a real time conversation between the two of us. And unlike TV or radio, there is a live chat generally on all the platforms that we would send a live stream to that's engaged with the conversation and can share comments and so forth that can be discussed by the hosts or shared on screen or whatever, basically as they come in.
Okay. So, I mean, this show, most of the people who watch it watch the replays, which I put on YouTube. I used to go live on YouTube. I don't anymore.
Right.
And partly because YouTube has weird issues and it doesn't give us much reach, allegedly. Right. I think it doesn't give them as much reach to live streams as other platforms. But, like, why did you kind of get so... Because I know historically, and that's part of the time when this show started in, like, lockdown period.
Right.
2020, I think it was. Live shows used to get a lot more reach on social media, and they had a lot more things. So a lot of people, including myself, started live shows then.
Right.
But why is it that, like, because I mean, you've not changed yourself to like the video podcast expert or anything. You're still live streaming. So
I do have a book on video podcast.
Well, yeah, true. But why do you think live streaming still works? Because there will be people who start a live stream show, nobody turns up, right, and they're like, "This is rubbish." Why would you say they should stick to it? Or maybe should they build a community somewhere else first and then start a live show? What's your advice in terms of like live streaming?
I think it depends on what their goals are, but let
Yeah.
me say these are the general advantages of live streaming. One is it's the fastest way to create audio and video content.
Yeah.
We do a half an hour show. At the end, you've got a half an hour of content. You could be really fussy about editing it and all that stuff, but in general, because it was done live, even if people watch it on a replay, they know it's live. They accept that there might be a few stumbles. They're not looking for a perfectly edited video. So you're creating content in real time. You have a more invested and more forgiving audience. It's more social in a sense that you can bring that real time chat in, and not only we're talking with each other, but anybody that engages in the chat could share something that enhances the broadcast, something about you that I never knew, or something about me, or something about the topic that neither one of us were aware of, or takes the discussion in an interesting angle we hadn't thought. So there's that whole audience participation thing that no other medium has, like live streaming. So those are a couple advantages. And the next advantage is, and you don't need a big audience for this, if you're selling any type of product or service, even if that's not the central focus of your show, you're not here going, buy this pen, buy this pen, buy this pen. But people know that I'm a pen. If they know that I'm a pen salesman, for example, or that I have a pen manufacturing company, and they have a question about it, they can ask me right on the live stream and I can answer it. Or they just observe how I talk about pens and how I solve problems for other people, and they get a sense of who I am and what doing business with me would be like. And, hey, this is a company that seems to care about its customers. So there's a variety of advantages that don't necessarily depend on the size of your audience. Now, if you're able to pull a big audience when you go live, of course, that's even more powerful, because now you're getting into destination viewing. People are turning up at a specific time just for you. That's a measurable thing that you can look at and say, I'm making an impact on this audience. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how people consume your content, whether they consume it live, whether they consume the replay on video, or they listen to a podcast that's, you rip the audio, you make an audio podcast, they read a blog post about it, they catch a little bit about it in a newsletter, they see a clip in an Instagram reel. Live gives you the opportunity to have all these different ways of distributing, but you're creating the content in real time. So, I often say, a 1 minute video or 2 minute video that's produced can take longer than an hour live stream, but you only have a minute or two of content that you want to put out there at the end. Where this is, you're going to have at the end of this potentially 15 pieces of content if you want to have that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like, that was one of the reasons why I was keen on, because all the stuff I do now, apart from my travel YouTube channel, where I haven't done a video for a while, is live. And it is because the expectation of less editing. Because even though I'm actually quite good at editing, and I do editing for other people's videos, I don't particularly like doing editing. And there is an expectation. But on the other hand, I think that there has been a flood of content onto the internet from not just live sources, but just in general. What are your tips for somebody to stand out if they're doing a live video? What are some of the kind of best practices? If we've got exactly the same audience on two shows, what would make one? What would you advise one show to do to make it better than the other shows in terms of standing out and just being a better live stream?
I wish I had some brilliant answer that, have a better show. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of talk online amongst, the so-called gurus about strategy and optimizing and all this stuff. And of course that matters, and I help people with that. But when I look at strategy from a high level, I'm looking at sort of what are your business objectives, and what kind of content and who's your audience, and a bunch of factors that go beyond simply, your title and thumbnail and what time you go live and things like that. But I'm looking 5 steps down the road in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And then how does your live streaming content fit in meeting those objectives? When you're talking about just sort of two random shows and what makes one better than the other, probably the host
Yeah.
and the conversation. Is it something that people resonate with or not? And it's kind of like, what makes a hit record, but you don't know.
Yeah.
It's not something that you necessarily can put into words, but you get a sense when you hear something, oh, this is going to sell or this is going to take off. So there's an element of that. That having been said, some of the better practices that tend to be successful hosts have is, especially these days with things crowded online and people wanting everything at the moment and whatever, don't spend a long time getting into your material with intros and, hey, I'm going to wait till more people show up. Meanwhile, you folks who showed up on time, you don't deserve the best of me. The people who show up in 15 minutes, they're going to, you may save your guest or your best thing for 20 minutes in, but you should be presenting something that's worthwhile and you're proud of, and you're not diminishing every minute. So get into it quickly. That's a part of it. Decide how you're going to engage your chat in a way that neither disrupts your content nor is so haphazard that, you don't really like. One way that people do is effective is they go to the chat like they're going to a commercial or taking a break in an old school radio or TV show. Like they do a segment and they go, let's see what's going on in the chat. Oh, so-and-so has a question, or you bring in what helps the show. But I think a desire to constantly interrupt your material to go, okay, so the person was shot on 3rd Street. Hey, Jim's here. Look at that. What up, Jim? That's not, nobody wants that, right? But take when you're at a natural break, hey, great to see Jim here. Haven't seen him in a while. Jennifer's here. Nice to see you. Somebody else said something earlier about what's the best microphone for live streaming. I've got some options on that we can get into. Just make it a natural kind of break and conversation, then get back to the show. And unless somebody puts something in the chat that you would naturally integrate into the dialogue, I think you want to keep that where you make sure by scheduling it or doing it where there's a break, you make sure that you're going to the chat, but you don't make it a haphazard thing so that for people who are watching on the replay or watching it on TV while they're having lunch or whatever, there's only so many shout outs that they want before they get back to the action. Unless your show is largely a Q&A, 3-hour long form live stream that people are like, okay, I get it. That's what this is. And I should mention another advantage of live is you can take super chats. And a lot of times people who do take super chats make some money. And one of the ways they do that is by prioritizing people who give a super chat. You want to get your question or comment, mentioned or discussed or go to the front of the line, you can do a super chat. But I think, getting started early and finding the right balance of engaging the chat without disrupting the content, having good energy, keeping it moving, being interested in your guest. If you have a guest, listening, promoting the why of your guests, since most guests aren't really famous. So we have Tim Lewis on today. He's here to discuss travel and his experiences in Asia over the last month or whatever. If you just said Ross Brand is on today, okay, well, other than the 5 people who know me, what does that mean? But you say Ross Brand's on here to talk about live streaming. He's got, 4 books on the topic and blah, 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 blah. Now it's like, okay, I want to hear what he's going to say, or even drill down another level. So some of it's also how you package and promote it. And too many people just say like, oh, I've got this guest on. And let me tell you, even the people that you think are internet famous, there's a wider world out there. Until I started live streaming, most of the people that like I would be goo goo gaga over having on my show, I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
There's LeBron James famous, and there's internet famous, and they're 2 different levels of popular recognition. So always think about why you're having someone on. Do they fit what your audience has, or how can you take it and make it work if you're an interview? So there's that possible part. But remember, they're coming back for you over time.
Yeah.
Like they show up once for a guest, but they come back for the host. So never forget that it's your show and you're the one who's serving your audience. I'm sure there's other things that'll come up as we're talking, but those are some of the main differentiators. If you're a low energy person and it's not a meditation live stream or something, then maybe live streaming isn't the best format. You may want to do a produced video in which your style of delivery may be great for a how-to video, or a read along or something else, but it may not work great for, hosting a live show. And let me say the last thing on this, and I think this fits with the video podcasting element, a lot of which is live and a lot of which is as though it were live. It's sort of what old school people would say, live to tape, basically not a lot of editing. And that is, people want to feel like they're hanging out with us, right? Like they may want to get some information from this, but more than anything, it's like, hey, it's fun hanging out with Ross and Tim today. And that's, I want to look in on this conversation and I want to listen to it and I want to hear what they have to say next. But also just like, it seems like a good time or an interesting conversation or whatever. And that's a big part of it. And that's how these podcasts that do well can go for 2 and 3 hours and things like that, because an audience is hanging out and they don't want to leave the conversation. They don't want to miss what comes up next.
Well, I mean, Joe Rogan, obviously, at the moment, I know this is probably a sore topic to some of the listeners and people, but one of the presidential candidates went on to Joe Rogan and talked for 3 hours, and the other didn't. And the one that did obviously won. So there are going to be people who are saying there is a lot of power in those long conversations. Because I know, though, I will slightly contra what you were saying. I think there is a lot of power in those long conversations. But the thing that I always challenge people with podcasting, because I've been involved in podcasting for years, is that the trouble is there's only so many of those 3-hour shows that you can listen to.
Right.
So if you do like the Ross Brand 3-hour show, you're competing against Joe Rogan and like, I know, some Marvel person who's a not thing. So again, I suppose there is a kind of element of branding that comes into that. And also like a way of making sure your show is appealing and well done in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were having a 3-hour conversation, right, and we were recording it live to tape, sort of, because I don't think Joe live streams any of his stuff.
No,
right? He does.
No.
Okay, like, so we were recording it live to tape. The difference is I would cut it into 4 episodes or something like that, and maybe try and find a cliffhanger or something where it's like, and we're going to find out. And then Tim was at the top of the mountain and he started to fall. Tune in tomorrow for how did he escape and is he okay? So cliffhanger about a cliffhanger. But what I'm saying is I would probably divide it up.
Yeah.
Because even if I wanted the energy of a long hangout and a long conversation and really in depth, I don't think people are making 4 hours or 3 hours or 2 hours to listen to my podcast. So by breaking it up, I get the advantages of the in-depth conversation and the connection and the hangout, but without asking people to give me that kind of time. And also he has, A-list guests, so people, a presidential candidate is going to be on. Some people will watch for a half an hour and get what they get out of it and go, that's enough. I get the idea. But other people will sit there and go, yeah, I want to hear what he thinks about this or he thinks about that. And you kind of do notice, I think, although 2020 was probably an exception, but if you go back to 2008, the candidate who was more internet savvy generally wins.
Yeah.
Obama was using social media. You got the sense that McCain had no idea what social media was. He was also much more advanced, at least in perception, than Mitt Romney was. Trump was more effective than Hillary Clinton. 2020 was such a strange year but again, Trump was far more adept at it than Harris was. I mean, so there is something now. I think there's a lot more at play than that from the economy. The economy was bad when Obama was running. That helped him. The economy was bad this time when Trump was running. That helped him tremendously. But I do think that having a sense of where it's at culturally, socially helps. And in 2008, Obama understood the power of social networks and social platforms, and they were already taking advantage, even though those were very new at that time. And I think maybe it was one of Trump's kids or whatever, basically said to him, do these long form podcasts or whatever. And you look at some of the candidates who didn't make it that far, but made a big name for themselves. They were doing long form podcasts all the time. Yeah. Because what happens is on these news shows, they get a 5-minute bite, or even if it's a 15-minute edited down. And it's like, they're always talking about the same thing. Like, you can sing the song before they play it, right? But on these long form podcasts, you don't know what they're going to get into. And it's very interesting to see how candidates handle it. And somebody like RFK Jr., who was kind of blackballed from much of the media or whatever, had no problem just sitting down for 2 and 3 hours and discussing his topics and whatever was brought up and sort of thinking on the spot. And he's not the only one. A lot of the candidates did that. But, it'll be interesting to see in 2028 what the medium is then, right? Maybe, some people thought maybe it was, kind of TikTok would be the way to go in this election, or, and while I'm not saying it didn't have an impact, but clearly the long form podcast, getting to know the candidates, turned out to be the bigger winner, I think, in this election than whether you did TikToks or not.
Yeah.
Now, whether your supporters helped you by doing TikToks, that I don't know.
Yeah.
And when I say TikToks, I mean reels, shorts, all that
the
stuff.
short form stuff.
Yeah. So, I think the extremes are where the movement's taking place, right? Like either, if you're a short form creative person who doesn't like live, but you like to create in the moment, or you like to edit, there's a lot of creativity you can put into a short form. Those are entertainment and they're addictive, and you get the scroll going with people. And then whether you can actually find a way to get that to link back to your offer, your product, your long form content. For some people it does, for some people it doesn't. And then there's the other side, which is going deeper than, so there's like shorter, quicker, funnier, more choice than TV, right? You get to keep swiping up and seeing if you get the hit of that funny thing or that point of view that resonates with you or whatever. And then there's the other side. There's video podcasting and there's live streaming, which tends to be more in depth and long form, and in some ways brings the audience along or lets them participate in a much deeper way than TV does, certainly, and probably more so than radio as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, as my part of my host due diligence, I need to
Yes.
ask you about the books you have behind
Oh,
you.
sure.
Give you a chance to plug. And I know that the 100 live streaming predictions, you have asked a certain person, me, for a prediction for next year's book. So first, let's talk about that book. You've done it for a few years now, I think, haven't you? Like the live streaming, or is it digital media predictions for next year? You ask 100 people.
Yeah,
So
so it's
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's 100 live streaming and digital media predictions. We are going on the 5th book coming out by the end of the year, and it's the 10th year of doing the predictions. So the prediction
Oh,
started as a blog post, started with 36 or 37 people the first year, and then each year it grew. It grew quickly to 80 something or 90 something. I don't know. But it grew in 1 year, I think it was 160 people. But we kind
yeah,
of settled with the book on 100.
yeah,
And sometimes it's a little more, but we stick with the 100 for, consistency. But when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden everybody was using these tools. So I thought the book could help a wider. It was kind of by industry people for industry people. Let's see what the industry think is going to happen. And then with the pandemic, it's like, well, now everybody's using video and is on Zoom all day and all that. So everybody could benefit from that. And then I would say last book and this coming book, if we were to start the series now, it would probably be 100 AI and digital media
yeah,
predictions, because AI is what's on everyone's mind. It's what every industry has to deal with, and how do we adapt to it? What does it mean for our roles, and what's ethical, and how to find that balance between creativity and speed, time to market, and where what the audience will accept from different things. So how do we adapt to this? And that's a big part of the last book, and it's a big part of the book coming up. But of course, video podcasting is big now, and so more people are on the idea of where video's going for podcasting. Does your podcast need video? Should it have video? How do you integrate video? What will people be doing with video? Will corporations, brands, solo creators, and how AI also impacts that. And then we get into some about online business and community and online courses, self-publishing, anything in the digital realm, newsletters.
yeah,
You and I are kind of on the I won't say cutting edge, because Substack's
yeah,
been around for quite a while now, probably 4 or 5 years at least, right? But
yeah,
Substack was the place where journalists go when they got fired or canceled, and they
yeah,
started a Substack, and some of their audience followed them over there. But in terms of Substack maybe being the next level social media network, or the place that you bring all your content together and can monetize, it's a potentially very powerful platform. I can't say like, okay, everybody run and jump on Substack. I've only
yeah,
been on it for about 3 weeks, although I've tried to create 3 or 4 pieces of content at least a week for it, or at least post that much content on it, so that I'm experimenting it, and I see a lot of experimenting with it. I see a lot of potential. So that's something which I know is mentioned in at least a couple of chapters in the book. But I mean, if we look forward, I think the role of Substack, how it fits into podcasting and video and newsletters. And, most people think of it as a writing platform, but it's more than that in email marketing. Does it take off? Does it get this wider use? Is it used by business? Does it have too many limitations to be your email service? There's a lot of things that, a lot of issues out there about Substack that it will be interesting to talk about in the next year or so coming. But of course, AI and I think video podcasting are two of the biggest things in the digital world right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to break my own rule without going for half an hour and go on a little bit to talk about Substack, because I'm like you. I'm kind of like, I've heard about Substack, but I never really. But the thing is, they've introduced the ability to upload podcast and video natively to the platform
Right.
for free.
Hmm.
Now, if you've been anywhere in the world of video, there aren't many places you can actually upload video for free
Right.
without paying a fee. I mean, there's YouTube, which obviously makes money from advertising. What I like about Substack is that it's got monetization built into the platform, and they make money when we make money
Right.
because they take a cut of the thing. So they're incentivized to provide tools for creators to make money. So you sign up and then you can have the free content, or you can go onto a paid plan and get the better content. And while I don't think that Substack is quite there yet, it's like I would like it be able to individually pay for content, and there's other things about the platform that are a bit weird.
Right.
I think it's a lot closer to being what the ideal social network is, as opposed to a lot of the legacy platforms, especially with Twitter and X going a bit haywire at the moment. I think they're trying to do things with X, but I'm not sure it's really working very well. And so, yeah, I'm also with you. Substack's an interesting platform, though we might both not be on it in 6 months' time if we don't really get much traction. That's always the thing with these platforms.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the positives, right? What
Yeah,
makes it different than other social media networks? Every time you post, an email goes out to your entire list.
yeah,
You can upload your list. You can own your audience, so to speak. You get to keep all those email addresses from anybody who subscribes. Now you could say, yeah, well, when I post on Facebook, but no, Facebook doesn't
yeah,
notify everybody. And if it does, there's a sea of notifications that it easily gets lost in. I mean, I don't know how many people, like, if you've been on Facebook for a long time and have a lot of contacts, you can't just sit there and read your notification. Like, I don't know. I post and run now. Like,
yeah,
then I come back and I look at the post that I think, oh, there might be some comments on that. But, Substack is different in that every time, so when I post a podcast traditionally or a video, I'm not necessarily emailing my list. I wasn't in that mindset. I didn't have,
yeah,
an email marketing system set up to where that's what I'm doing. I have a book coming out. I'm emailing my list. I have something to say occasionally to get off my chest. Maybe I'm emailing my list. I have a tip or something, but I'm not emailing my list regularly until I started doing LinkedIn newsletters at the beginning of this year. And that's once a week, once every other week. But with Substack, now they're getting emails, a couple of podcasts, a video, a newsletter, a roundup newsletter, maybe one or two opinion pieces. Every couple of weeks, they're getting 5 or 6 emails from me. And it's like, okay, let's see if they like that. Number one, do they want to hear from me that much? But at least people know when I'm creating
yeah,
content, and I know they're getting notified. And I think for a platform now, that's a difference maker, given that the organic reach on these other platforms is not very good. And the notifications are sort of like most people, if they're not looking for it, then they don't necessarily see it, right? If they're not engaging with you, you're not going to be at the top of their feed. This way, you subscribe to somebody, you get the email, you choose. Do I want to open it? Do I want to look at it? But at least you're getting in front of people. And so I think that's really good for podcasts, for blog posts, that you now do as an article or a newsletter on Substack. So that's one good side. Like you said, the built-in monetization, you don't have to set up a cart somewhere. You don't have
yeah,
to take them to another platform, or, you can set up and people can subscribe right there. It's a natural part of the flow of the platform. And so that's great. You don't have to invest anything. You do have to give 10%, but if you're making money and you don't have to any overhead sort of getting into it, that's pretty awesome, right? I
yeah,
mean, so there's that. Like you said, tested. I uploaded a video that was like 3 gigs or something. No issue whatsoever. It just
Mm,
they're paying for the storage. So wonderful, right? Usually that's YouTube and Vimeo only to a certain extent.
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And I think it fosters creativity. It fosters some sense of community because you have the notes, which are sort of like a Twitter feed, but they tend to be more focused on quality than on just going back and forth with people and things like that. Okay, so the downside is how do you
Yeah.
grow is because people subscribe to you, are they really interested in your material? Are they interested in what you're putting out there? Do they want to be part of your community? Or, is it like a follow for follow thing that goes on
Yeah.
Twitter and elsewhere for years? What's really happening? Are you really going to grow? Does your content that you're doing, being me, being you, being anybody else, does that resonate with other people? Or is this just, it's just sort of like, okay, it seems like it's a cool platform, but 6 months from now, we both look at each other and go, boy, that was a lot of work for no money.
Yeah. We have a comment from Livestream Consultants, and I'm trying to remember who's behind Livestream Consultants, because that could be anybody really. But
Come
I'm
out
sure
from
probably
behind the shadows.
yes. But thanks anyway,
Yeah.
and
Hey.
just for us to start wrapping up, finishing these things. How can people, like, let's say somebody is a pen manufacturer. Let's use the example you used earlier, and they're interested in introducing live streaming for their company.
Sure.
How would they find out about you, and what kind of things would you provide? Like, what do you do as a live streaming strategist for a company, and how would they get in touch with you and all the other stuff? Would they
Yeah.
need to
So,
know?
I mean, I would help them develop a strategy for creating, distributing their content and align it with what their business objectives are. In some cases, I actually host shows for
Yeah,
companies. In other cases, I find or train their talent. So there's a wide variety of services that I provide depending on what the client needs. They can find me at livestreamuniverse.com, livestreamuniverse.com/contact. If you want to reach out to me, you can also reach out to me on any of the socials. And if you're just interested in getting some more content, rossbrand.substack.com.
yeah.
rossbrand.substack.com is where it all goes down these days.
And if you do your paid version, then they're probably going to get great content.
I haven't done a paid version yet. I
Yeah, well,
have
me neither, actually. So
no gatekeeping going on there. Anybody can see anything that I post right now.
yeah. Anyway, it's been great to have you on the show, and I'm going to press the totally unnecessary outro.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me before you hit the button. It was a good time catching up.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the people watching. There have been people watching, which is nice to know. I knew one of them commented. They probably all. What usually happens, everybody comments just as I press the outro. That's right. So thanks for everybody watching.
This is what God requires.
I was suffering quite a lot with my confidence about 2 years ago, and on a whim, I booked a boudoir shoot, and I was really, really impressed with the photos that came back. And I thought, oh gosh, okay, like maybe I could get into modeling because I thought maybe this is like a new start for me. So I spoke to a contact, and she said pageantry would be a really good way to go, especially being a plus size woman. So she pointed me in the direction of Miss Voluptuous pageant, so aimed at plus size women from all over the world. And the director, lovely Natalie, she gave me the chance.